Hey guys, tonight we're going back to a time when indoor plumbing didn't exist. Shoes were optional and usually regrettable, and the idea of a health inspection would have caused a medieval innkeeper to cackle himself hoarse. You're standing on a muddy road, and it's not just any mud, it's a historical blend of horse dung chamber pot runoff and some mystery goo you really don't want to think too hard about. The wind cuts through your cloak, damp and indifferent, and your socks, if you're lucky enough to own any, gave up the will to live several paces ago. Your fingers are stiff from the cold, your stomach is empty, and your last meal might have been yesterday's gruel or a questionable root you found in the woods. But ahead, flickering candlelight dances behind warped glass panes. The faint thump of music or possibly brawling greets your ears, along with a warm, yeasty aroma you desperately hope is bread. You're heading toward the town's beating heart, the tavern, the social hotspot. The medieval answer to a dive bar crossed with a truck stop and a minor health crisis. You're desperate enough to be excited about it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing the global bedtime crew checking in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mud is relentless. It sucks at your boots like a toddler who doesn't want you to leave the room. You trudge on past crumbling stone walls and crooked shop fronts shuttered for the night. A single lantern flickers on a post, casting a small circle of light where a rat the size of a cat gives you a judging glance before scuttling off into the gloom. You pass a man vomiting quietly into a barrel-standard town greeting and nod politely as if this is completely normal. Because it is. For 14th century Europe anyway. You've made it through the town gates before curfew, and that's an achievement in itself. After dark, the guards don't ask questions. They just assume you're a thief or a heretic. Or both. The tavern looms ahead, 2 stories of timber and daub, leaning ever so slightly to one side, like it's had one too many ales itself. A swinging wooden sign above the door creaks ominously in the wind. Painted on it is either a dragon, a lion, or an extremely confused cow. Artistry wasn't exactly thriving in this village. You duck under the lintel, you're not especially tall. The building is just comically short, and step onto a threshold worn smooth by centuries of muddy feet. A waft of hot, sweaty air greets you. The unmistakable cocktail of beer-wet wool, wood smoke, and possibly feet. You inhale deeply. It smells historic. Historians still argue whether medieval taverns truly served as democratic social hubs, or were more often controlled by local lords or church interests. But what they do agree on is that everyone from peasants to petty knights needed somewhere to drink away the plague years, and you're about to join them. A small child barrels past you with a wooden spoon, screaming something about a fire in the bread hole. No one moves. You step aside politely. He seems like he's got it under control. The door slams shut behind you, and just like that, you're in. Inside is chaos wrapped in candlelight. The ceiling beams are blackened from centuries of open hearth smoke. Every wall is slightly crooked, and most surfaces, including people, are coated in a fine layer of grime. The air is thick with laughter, shouting, and the occasional curse muttered into a frothy tankard. You blink through the gloom, eyes adjusting as you realize how many people are packed into this wooden box. And not all of them are entirely conscious. One man slumps over a table, his mouth slightly open, snoring into a half-eaten onion. Another is vigorously scratching something under his tunic you really hope is just a flea. Somewhere in the corner, a dog with one ear snoozes peacefully on a pile of cloaks. It might be the cleanest being in the room. You edge forward. No one acknowledges you, which is ideal. The last thing you want is attention. You're just here to survive the night, get warm, and maybe, if the gods are smiling, find something vaguely edible. There's no official queue or hostess stand, just a vaguely threatening barmaid with her sleeves rolled up yelling at a man who just dropped a tankard. She hurls a crust of bread at him like it's a throwing axe. You make a mental note, do not annoy the barmaid, but don't worry. Soon you'll be seated, possibly fed, and if you're lucky you'll only catch one disease tonight. And yet, strangely, it's kind of magical. In that uncomfortable medieval sort of way. You made it off the road past the guards and into the warmth. The fire crackles, the room hums, your stomach growls, and somewhere in the back of your brain a little voice says, you probably won't survive this, but you smile anyway, because for now you're safe, sort of. You shuffle forward, trying not to step on any toes, human or otherwise. The floor beneath you is uneven, a patchwork of warped wooden planks slick with mud-spilled ale and a mysterious sticky substance that might once have been stew or blood. Let's pretend it was stew. Above you the ceiling droops. The thick beams, black with soot, stretch overhead like old bones. Cobwebs dangle lazily in the corners, glistening slightly in the firelight. You wonder how many spiders live rent-free up there and decide not to look too closely. Your eyes scan the room for the telltale signs of a tavern, raucous laughter, mugs clinking, the occasional wooden spoon flung like a javelin. But what you're really searching for is that sacred symbol of survival, a wooden sign swinging above the door with a name carved into it. The boar's tooth, the sleeping stoat, the unwashed knight. They're all popular contenders. Tonight, though, you've arrived at the thirsty pike. Whether that refers to a fish or a weapon is unclear. The painted image above the tavern is so faded and weather-worn it could honestly be either. Still, it's unmistakable. You're in the right place. The locals don't look up when you enter. That's either a good sign they're used to people coming in, sitting down and never getting up again. But this tavern, like most in the medieval world, isn't just a place for drinking. It's the nerve center of village life. Here deals are struck over beer marriage arrangements, whispered between sips, and local disputes loudly debated until someone gets a stool to the face. You're not just stepping into a pub, you're stepping into a centuries-old institution that somehow manages to be both revered and extremely sticky. Historians still debate whether taverns like this were inclusive spaces for all social classes or subtly segregated by profession and status. What's certain, though, is that almost everyone passed through one at some point. Travelers, pilgrims, soldiers, scoundrels, and people like you who just really needed to sit down. You squeeze past a man who's halfway through dancing with a chair. He grins at you with the wild-eyed intensity of someone who's been drinking since noon and believes the furniture might be possessed. Behind him, an old woman in a shawl mutters into a bowl of soup, stirring it like it personally wronged her. The tables are long, communal, and completely full. You catch snippets of conversation as you pass. Someone's cow had triplets. A pig was arrested, yes, arrested, and apparently the new priest has very suspicious ankles. You find yourself gravitating toward the back corner of the room where a slightly less grimy table waits in the flickering shadows. There's a stool free, just one tucked beside a wall, plastered with faded herb bundles and a poorly stuffed pheasant that's seen better centuries. As you approach, a man with a forehead the size of a battlefield eyes you. You nod. He grunts. That's practically a warm welcome in these parts. You sit. The stool creaks in protest. The table is sticky. The wall behind you leaks something faintly green. And yet, this is the most comfort you've had in days. You exhale, letting the warmth of the fire and the clamor of the room wrap around you like a scratchy, beer-scented blanket. A woman walks by, holding 3 mugs in each hand, somehow balancing a plate of stew on her head. She doesn't spill a drop. You're mildly intimidated. At the far end of the room, a man strums a lute with the desperate energy of someone being paid per note. His song drifts above the din, something about a knight, a goat, and a tragic misunderstanding. You don't quite catch the lyrics, but you feel strangely moved. Behind the bar, a thick-set woman with a face like a tree stump is yelling at a barrel. Either she's naming it, scolding it, or both. Her apron is more patch than fabric, and she pours drinks like she's throwing punches. That's probably the tavern keeper. Taverns weren't always run by men, you know. In many medieval towns, women managed these establishments, often widows savvy enough to turn a profit from the travelling masses. Records from 14th century England show women innkeepers being fined for serving bad ale, which raises the question, was there good ale? That's a debate well saved for a few mugs later. You hear a clatter and turn to see a piglet scampering across the floor, chased by a limping man holding a wooden spoon like a weapon. No one moves to help. In fact, someone cheers. The pig wins. A dog barks. Somewhere a man shouts, "That's my duck, and you don't ask questions." It's all very alive, chaotic, loud, and somehow weirdly cozy, like a fever dream you don't want to wake from just yet. You lean back against the wall. Something squelches. Best not to think about it. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting long flickering shadows. You can feel the warmth on your face, smell the mix of smoke and roasting meat, though from what animal you're afraid to guess. You look around and realize this is probably the cleanest, driest place for miles. It might not have silk cushions or perfumed air, but it has stories, warmth and ale that probably won't kill you. Probably. And hey, that's the medieval dream. The door swings shut behind a newcomer, sending a gust of cold wind and a few startled chicken feathers through the smoky air. A collective groan rises from the regulars closest to the entrance, one of whom throws a turnip at the door for good measure. The warmth here is hard won, and no one appreciates the draught. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and glance up. The low ceiling above your head is so blackened with soot that it looks like night has seeped in and stayed. In the flickering firelight, the beams glow faintly red like the ribs of some great sleeping beast. Smoke curls around them lazily, making its way toward a hole in the roof that may or may not have been intentional. Your table is pushed close to the hearth, and that's both a blessing and a hazard. A spark leaps out occasionally, landing on a neighbour's sleeve, or disappearing into someone's mug. No one reacts. Fire safety hasn't been invented yet, just singed eyebrows and cautionary ballads. The food smells better the closer you get to the kitchen, or more accurately, the place where heat is applied to things that were once alive. There's a stew bubbling somewhere in the back, thick and vaguely meaty, its contents indistinct, but definitely chewing on your curiosity. Historians agree that medieval tavern fare was heavily dependent on geography and season. Near the coast, expect fish often dried or smoked. Inland villages like this one. Mostly root vegetables, lentils, tough cuts of meat, and occasionally something that used to fly or squeal. One surviving account from 1387 even mentions stewed hedgehog in spiced ale. Yum. A barmaid swings by your table with a tray of mugs. Her expression says she'd rather be anywhere else, including plague duty. Her arms are strong, her eyes sharper than the kitchen knives, and her hair is pinned up with what appears to be a chicken bone. She slams a wooden mug in front of you. The contents slosh. You give her a grateful nod. She stares until you produce a coin which she snatches so fast you swear her hand is part owl. You wrap your hands around the mug, grateful for the heat. It's sticky, faintly warm, and smells like a blend of bred yeast apples and something sharp, possibly vinegar. This, apparently, is ale. The standard drink of the era, ale, was everywhere. People drank it with breakfast, lunch, dinner, and between prayers. Why? Because water wasn't always safe. At least the ale had been boiled during brewing, killing off the worst of the microbes. That said, your first sip still tastes like someone left a sponge in a puddle for a week and added barley for texture. You wince, but take another gulp. It's terrible, but in a strangely comforting way. Like bad coffee or a mediocre sitcom, at least it's something. Behind you, two men argue over who owns the dog sleeping under the bench. The dog opens one eye, sighs dramatically, and shifts away like it's heard this all before. To your left, a pair of women share a loaf of dark bread so hard it could be used as a weapon. They take turns dipping it into their mugs to soften it, speaking in hushed tones about the miller's alleged affair with a travelling puppet master. Scandalous. You pick up the crust sitting on your table. It's stale, slightly fuzzy on one end, and deeply committed to staying whole. You chew it anyway. It tastes like dust and smoke, but at least it's something solid. Then, as your teeth work their way through the second bite, you catch sight of the tavern wall beside the hearth. A row of herbs hangs drying sage, thyme, maybe nettle. And just below them, carved directly into the wood, are names. Hundreds of them. Some legible, some scratched out. Some written in Latin, others in sloppy runes, and a few just pictures. A crude fish. A chicken with fangs. One that appears to be a man kissing a turnip. These are the signatures of previous visitors, the original Yelp reviews. I was here. I survived, I left a turnip. You run a finger over the nearest carving. The grooves are deep. Someone took the time to be remembered. You wonder what their night here was like. Did they laugh? Drink too much? Get into a fist fight over the last pickled onion? You'll never know, but for a second you feel the faintest connection across time. New Arya, a voice rasps from beside you. You turn to find an older man leaning across from another table. His beard is braided with bits of cloth, and his eyebrows could shelter a small family of birds. You nod. He chuckles. Thought so. You haven't stopped looking around like a chicken in a thunderstorm. You smile, sheepish. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a small pouch. With a dramatic flourish, he opens it to reveal walnuts. "Trade you a walnut for your name," he says. You blink. This feels like a trap, or a very weird game. You tell him anyway. He nods solemnly and places the walnut on your table like a sacred relic. Then he returns to his ale, muttering about rude monks and foolish kings, and something about losing a boot to a goose. A fringe tidbit, perhaps, but worth noting. In some taverns, regulars developed their own bartering systems. Coins were scarce and trust scarcer. People traded herbs, gossip carved trinkets, or in this case nuts. You take a bite of your bread, chase it with another grimace-inducing gulp of ale, and lean back. The room is still loud, still smoky, still chaos, but somehow you've found your rhythm in it. The fire snaps. Laughter rises and falls. The table creaks beneath your elbows. And for the first time tonight, you let your shoulders relax. You sit back on your questionable stool, a little warmer now, a little fuzzier from the ale, and begin to survey the battlefield before you, by which of course you mean the available seating options. Finding the right place to settle in a medieval tavern is equal parts strategy, luck, and pure survival instinct. Your current perch, while blessedly close to the fire, is located just a little too close to the spit. Each time the barmaid turns the handle flecks of something brown and juicy arc into the air with the wild abandon of a painter who never quite grasped boundaries. A bit lands on your sleeve. You pretend it didn't. It's fine. Protein. You shift, trying to angle your body away from the spit splash zone, and your stool responds with a creak that sounds eerily like a small animal in distress. You freeze. No one reacts. Probably normal. The man next to you suddenly stands, announcing to no one that he has business with the moon. His ale is unfinished. His exit is not elegant. You immediately claim the spot-on upgrade by tavern standards. It's marginally drier and mercifully positioned between two sleeping patrons. Human buffer zones. A true medieval luxury. You settle in, letting your elbows rest on a table that's been worn smooth by generations of spills, elbows, and impromptu knife games. A small notch near your hand looks suspiciously like someone attempted to carve a tic-tac-toe board. Or perhaps it was an attempt at a medieval family crest. Hard to tell. Artistic standards were flexible. Historians still argue whether these tavern tables function more like shared spaces for social mixing or defaulted into unspoken seating hierarchies based on class and trade. But tonight in this crowded room, the rule is simple. If it's flat and no one is passed out on it, it's yours. You glance across the table at your new neighbors. One of them is a burly man with hands like shovels and eyes that suggest he's either deeply wise or hasn't blinked since Tuesday. He's focused intently on his spoon, which he's turning over in his hand as though deciphering ancient runes. The other is a child. At least you think it's a child bundled in so many layers of patched wool, it might also be a travelling hay bale. The burly man grunts once. The child sneezes, then resumes eating a bowl of something so viscous it wobbles even after the spoon leaves it. You avoid eye contact and grip your ale like a lifeline. Across the room, a minor commotion breaks out. Two men are arguing in low tones, one gesturing passionately with a sausage, the other shaking his head and pointing at his boot. You assume it's a complex dispute over property boundaries or pig theft. Possibly both. The sausage is eventually thrown. It bounces harmlessly off the wall and is retrieved by the one-eared dog, who immediately buries it beneath someone's cloak. This is the magic of tavern seating. You're close enough to the chaos to witness it, but far enough that no one's blood or dinner lands on you. You've reached what historians today would classify as optimal splatter distance. Your elbow bumps something beneath the table. You look down. A basket of onions stares back at you, or perhaps it's someone's hat. In this lighting, both seem equally plausible. You nudge it back gently with your foot, just in case it bites. Meanwhile, the barmaid has returned, this time carrying what looks like a board of food, a generous term. A thick hunk of dark bread, a slice of cheese so aged it has opinions, and something round and grey that may have once been a fruit. She slams it in front of you without breaking stride. You nod in thanks. She does not nod back. You're pretty sure that's just how she shows affection. The bread is as hard as ever, but your ale-softened stomach welcomes the change of texture. The cheese is sharp, tangy, and possibly sentient. You chew carefully, unwilling to provoke it. To your left, a man starts to sing. No one asked him to. No one joins in. But his voice isn't terrible, more of a gravelly hum like a bear trying lullabies. His tune floats above the clatter of mugs and murmured secrets, and for a moment it softens the room. Even the spoon-gesturing sausage men pause to listen. You look around. A woman is braiding her daughter's hair by the hearth. An old man is darning a sock with monk-like focus. A young couple in the corner whisper jokes into each other's ears, giggling over what's clearly their first pint each. This isn't just a pit stop. It's a slice of something real messy, loud, imperfect, but deeply alive. A quirky detail for the evening in some taverns, particularly those along pilgrimage routes, patrons would carve prayers into the wooden beams. Little pleas to saints or divine beings scrawled, while tipsy, hoping that someone celestial was listening. You glance up at a rafter above your seat and spot what might be a crude angel, or a duck in a dress. Either way, someone once believed in it enough to carve it overhead. Your seat is lumpy, your bread is stale, your ale is questionable. And yet you feel okay. The fire crackles. The man keeps humming. Somewhere the one-eared dog sighs. You shift slightly on your stool, avoiding the splinters, and lean back just enough to relax, but not so far that the stool gives out. You've cracked the code. Congratulations. You've found the least disgusting seat in the tavern. Now that you've staked your claim on a relatively stable stool and tasted the bread brick of survival, it's time for the most treacherous challenge of the evening, ordering more ale without looking like a total outsider. You scan the room for the barmaid. She's orbiting the tavern like a comet of contempt, moving fast and knocking things over as she goes. You catch her eye. Mistake. She changes direction, immediately approaching like a thunderstorm in human form. What she barks. You freeze. The words "more ale" please catch in your throat. Your instinct is to smile. Don't. Smiling is suspicious here. Instead, you nod, solemnly, point at your mug, and add a coin to the table with exaggerated slowness, like a squirrel offering a gift to a fox. She glares, scoops up the mug and the coin with a scoff, and vanishes in a blur of clogs and elbows. Success. You live to drink another round. Historians still argue whether tavern servers were treated with a measure of community respect or just endured like bad weather. But one thing is clear, these women were tough quick and not to be trifled with. Many were widows or single women earning a hard living, and if they had to break a few noses to maintain order, so be it. You take a moment to observe the other patrons. Some stare blankly into their mugs. Others engage in quiet, slurred conversations, leaning so close their noses almost touch. And in the far corner, two figures play what appears to be a complex game involving dice pebbles and a feather. No one seems to be winning. Then, like a gift from the heavens, your ale returns. The barmaid slams it down in front of you, sloshing liquid across the table. She's already gone before you can thank her, which is for the best, honestly. She doesn't look like she's in the mood for appreciation. You raise the mug for a sniff. Still faintly vinegary, still unsettlingly warm. But maybe your standards have dropped. You take a sip. Yep, still gross. But gross in a familiar way now, like that one cousin who only bathes at Christmas. You sigh and look up just in time to spot a man entering the tavern wearing what can only be described as armor. Not gleaming heroic armor, but the sort of dented, pieced-together chainmail you'd expect from a man who's fought 3 battles and lost 4. He stomps in with the authority of someone looking for trouble or a free drink. The room quiets. Not silent, but the background buzz dims just a notch. People glance up from their mugs. The bard misses a note. Even the one-eared dog raises his head. The armoured man scans the room and then mercifully slumps onto a bench near the fire, removing his gauntlets with a grunt. Everyone exhales and resumes pretending not to care. You do the same. Rule number 1, don't make eye contact with the knight. There's an open scholarly debate about whether knights routinely mixed with peasants in taverns like these. Some argue they stuck to higher class inns. Others suggest that during long travels even knights were humbled by the lure of hot stew and mediocre ale. Your eyes drift back to the knight as he pulls off a boot and shakes out what might be half a gravel road. Yeah, no one is above swamp foot. Your attention is drawn back to your table by a soft thump. A different barmaid, this one younger with a slightly less menacing vibe, has placed a small bowl in front of you. You didn't order it, but you also don't dare question it. Inside beans? Maybe. Possibly lentils. There's definitely something floating in the mix that could be an old root or a new rodent. It smells edible adjacent. You nod your thanks. She shrugs and walks away. Your ale-soaked bread thanks you. It's been asking for a friend. You dip the edge of the bread into the bowl. It soaks up the murky liquid with the enthusiasm of a sponge. You take a bite. It's hot, a little peppery, and surprisingly flavorful. Victory. Across the table, the bundled child looks at your bowl, then at you. You slide it an inch closer to them in solidarity. They accept with a solemn nod and begin scooping beans into their mouth like it's a timed event. In a quiet moment between mouthfuls, you overhear 2 old men discussing the local bishop's mysterious disappearance. One says he was cursed. The other swears he saw the bishop running into the woods wearing nothing but socks and screaming about mushrooms. Both agree it's none of their business. Welcome to medieval conversation, equal parts truth, madness, and mud-splattered rumour. These taverns weren't just for eating and drinking. They were the social media of their time. News travelled from hearth to hearth, distorted, embellished, and set to music if someone had a lute and poor judgment. A fringe tidbit, some taverns, especially in port towns, had official news walls where travellers could pin notes or messages for others. One surviving parchment found in Bruges reads simply, "Tell Willem I am not dead, just married." Worse. You take another sip of ale. Somehow it's grown on you, or maybe your taste buds have just surrendered. The fire pops loudly, startling the one-eared dog. It barks once, then promptly falls back asleep. A chicken clucks somewhere overhead. Yes, overhead. There's a loft above, and some fowl clearly decided this tavern's rafters were prime real estate. You feel a strange peace settle over you. Despite the smells, the noise, the medieval health hazards lurking in every shadow, you're content. You've ordered your drink, kept your head down, avoided most of the fights, and even made contact with something edible. You've navigated the hardest part of the evening, ordering ale, and surviving the stare-down that came with it. Now you can just enjoy being part of the backdrop. The tavern hums around you, alive and untamed. For now you belong. The mug is half empty or half full, depending on your outlook and how many teeth you still have. Either way, the ale is doing its job, warming your stomach, softening your edge, and gently numbing the part of your brain that still remembers what fresh water tastes like. You set it down and watch as a fly circles the rim, seems to weigh its options, then thinks better of it. That's how you know it's authentic. Medieval ale, after all, isn't what you'd call refined. It's not aged in oak barrels with subtle citrus undertones. It's brewed fast, served young, and made from whatever grains and herbs the brewer had on hand. Think less craft brewery and more bucket near a fire. Mainstream history tells us ale was a staple because water was often unsafe. But the full story's more nuanced. Some towns had excellent wells, others not so much. But everyone trusted ale because it was boiled in the brewing process, plus it gave you a pleasant buzz and helped ignore the fact that your boots were mostly holes. You take another sip. This batch is darker than the last, earthier. You suspect it's been spiced with something floral, or maybe the brewer dropped a flower in it by accident. Either way, it's working. And here's a quirky tidbit: in some regions they flavoured ale with all sorts of wild herbs, bog myrtle, yarrow, even henbane. That last one is mildly poisonous, and also mildly hallucinogenic. If the walls start whispering later, now you know why. A commotion near the fire draws your attention. Someone has clearly lost a bet or a goat, and now they're shouting. Not angry, not yet, but heated. You hear the unmistakable thump of a mug being slammed down, followed by the scraping of a bench. You shrink slightly into your seat. If you've learned anything from the past hour, it's that most tavern fights start over. Very small things: spilled ale, stolen bread, or the accusation that someone's beard is fake. Fortunately, it blows over quickly. One of the older patrons smacks the table with a walking stick and bellows something about sitting down or getting thrashed. Order is restored, for now. A man at the next table nods at your mug. First time here, he asks, his voice low and gruff. You nod. He smiles with one side of his mouth. Careful with that batch. They say it's strong enough to knock the fleas off a friar. You raise your mug in a mock toast. He returns the gesture with his own, revealing a chunk of something floating in his drink. You choose not to comment. It's probably just a bonus. You glance back toward the hearth where a woman is refilling mugs from a large sooty kettle. It bubbles ominously. She stirs it with a wooden paddle that's almost certainly been used for other non-beverage purposes. But no one seems to mind. You're beginning to understand the logic. The ale isn't meant to be good. It's meant to be there. It fills the silences. It dulls the day's hardships. It makes strangers laugh at the same jokes and sing the same off-key songs. It's less a drink and more a social lubricant with murky floaters. Historians still debate whether the average ale was truly low in alcohol or if it varied wildly based on the brewer. Some records speak of small, alia weak brew for everyday hydration, while others describe powerful concoctions capable of dropping a grown man halfway through a verse of Greensleeves. Speaking of which, someone near the back is attempting a song. You hear the first few notes. It's hard to tell if they're singing or if a goat is having an emotional breakdown. Either way, It draws a cheer from the locals and mugs are raised in celebration. You join in half-heartedly, trying not to spill yours. The floor is already slick, and you don't want to test the tavern's slipping-to-injury ratio. You notice a small sign above the bar. It reads, "No throwing bones at the hounds." A warning or a suggestion, unclear, but it implies at least one person did that enough times to justify engraving it into wood. A pig walks by. Yes, indoors. It pauses to sniff, a boot grunts, and moves on. You barely register it now. You've adapted. You focus back on your drink. The sediment has settled into a soft swirl near the bottom. You stir it gently and take another sip. It's warmer now, saltier too. Possibly from tears yours or someone else's. You let out a slow breath. The room seems softer now, rounder at the edges. The chatter fades into a hum. The fire dances. The smell of roasting meat, maybe beef, maybe ambitious squirrel, blends with the sweet tang of malt. You're not drunk, not really, just medieval level mellow. You understand now why people came here night after night, even when they didn't have coin. Just being here, hearing voices, sharing warmth, drinking something that doesn't come with a skull on the label feels like medicine. Across the table, the bundled child is asleep, their tiny mug still clutched in both hands. The burly man next to them offers you a look that says, "Don't wake them or I'll bury you with my spoon." Message received. You lean back, arms folded, eyes half closed. The ale buzz curls around you like a scratchy wool blanket. Not comfortable exactly, but familiar. You have no idea what time it is. No clocks here, no windows either. But time seems irrelevant. You've entered tavern time, measured not in hours, but in songs, in empty mugs, in the rise and fall of voices. The ale is doing its job. And for now, so are you. The warmth has soaked into your bones. Your mug is a little lighter and your eyes are adjusting to the low amber glow of the fire and the tallow candles dotting the walls. Their flames flicker erratically, casting jittery shadows that make the carved wood panels look like they're breathing. You lean in slightly, not from fear, but because the voices near the hearth have become intriguing. It starts with a whisper. A woman with a frayed red scarf leans in toward a cluster of grey-bearded men, her voice low and urgent. You can't catch every word, but one phrase comes through clear as day. The miller's wife saw him speaking Latin backwards. Cue the collective gasp. One of the men makes the sign of the cross with a crust of bread. Another mutters about devil work and bad barley. You're witnessing a critical medieval tradition gossip the original news outlet. And oh, how it thrives here. In a world without headlines or status updates, the tavern is where truths lies, and absolutely bonkers conspiracy theories are exchanged like currency. You sit a little straighter, sip your warm ale, and settle into your role as a quiet observer. Historians generally agree that taverns weren't just watering holes. They were informal information networks. Travel was slow. Books were rare. So if you wanted to know what was going on in the next village or who was cursed this week, this was where you'd come. A man 2 tables over leans forward. "I heard the abbot's got 3 thumbs," he says, as if revealing royal secrets. A woman next to him nods solemnly as though this explains a great many things. Someone chuckles nearby. You turn to see a wiry old man with wild eyebrows and a leather pouch slung at his hip. "You know the miller can't even spell his own name," he says with a grin. "Backwards or forwards?" Laughter erupts. Even the one-eared dog barks in amusement or indigestion, hard to tell. You sip your ale, smiling into the mug. There's something comforting about it. This strange communal ritual of whispering half-truths by firelight. Even the lies carry warmth stitched with superstition memory and the comfort of shared bewilderment. A fringe tidbit in certain villages, tavern-goers developed entire systems of coded storytelling to skirt local laws about gossip or slander. A tale about a goose with 2 shadows might be understood to mean someone was caught sneaking around at night. Medieval subtweets, basically. Tonight's hot topic seems to be the miller. One woman insists he made a deal with a traveling magician. Another swears she saw him eat a loaf of bread without chewing. The consensus: suspicious, probably cursed, possibly part duck. You sit back and watch the layers unfold. Everyone's got a story, everyone's got a theory, and most of them contradict each other. It's not just scandal, though. Some tales are soft nostalgic. A stooped man in a faded green tunic speaks quietly of the river freezing early, like it did the year his wife was born. A young man tells a story about seeing a comet in the sky, bright as silver and twice as fast. The crowd ooze. Someone offers an egg in exchange for more details. The storyteller accepts. You feel it, this invisible web, being spun in real-time threads of memory, myth, and moonshine tangled into a collective dream. Then comes the pause, that soft lull where everyone's said their piece and the room seems to exhale all at once. The fire pops, a log shifts, the candles gutter slightly. You hear a voice near your table. You ever seen a ghost? It's the burly man beside you speaking for the first time in over an hour. You hesitate. Shake your head. He nods slowly. I did. In a fog near the old gallows tree. He leans closer, breath thick with onion and ale. She wore bells. No feet. Just floated. Said my name. You raise your eyebrows but say nothing. This is not the time for skepticism. Still dream about her, he adds, then returns to his stew like nothing happened. Historians still debate how much medieval people actually believed in ghosts, demons, and other supernatural things. But tavern records and private letters suggest that belief in the uncanny was absolutely a part of everyday life. And a tavern like this, perfect breeding ground for spectral sightings and goosebump-inducing tales. A man with a pipe, wooden, carved, and likely more tar than tobacco leans in, and says, I once met a man who could smell lies. He nods, seriously, waits a beat, then adds, died of it. Too much truth in the air, more laughter. The tavern sways with it like an old boat still afloat against all odds. You realize you're smiling again, that warm, involuntary kind, the kind that sneaks up on you when you've momentarily forgotten to be cautious. You raise your mug again, and this time someone clinks theirs against it in silent toast. You're part of the rumour now, the background noise, the nameless listener. And you're okay with that. As the fire burns lower and the stories grow weirder, you let your eyes wander across the beams and shadows. Somewhere above, a chicken flaps softly in its sleep. You're still hungry. You're still unsure what's floating in your ale. But for the first time in a long while, you feel like you belong. And in a world without maps or messages that's more valuable than gold. Somewhere between your third or fourth sip, who's counting anymore? A sudden hush falls over the tavern. It's not total silence, but a strange lull, like the building itself is holding its breath. You glance around, wondering what triggered it. Then you hear it. A voice, or at least an attempt at one. High-pitched, slightly nasal, and startlingly off-key, it starts warbling a mournful melody about love lost in the spring, a stolen sheep, and something that might be metaphorical heartbreak or just actual indigestion. You turn your head slowly toward the sound. It's the bard. Every tavern seems to have one, the performer, the minstrel, the travelling lute-hugger, hoping to earn a coin, a bed, or at the very least, a warm bowl of something chewy. Tonight's specimen is lanky bird-like and sporting a tunic that may have once been green, but now more closely resembles swamp mold. His boots don't match. One of them might be a shoe, and in his arms the lute, or what's left of one. It has 4 strings, 2 tuning pegs, and an aura of general despair. He strums it like he's mad at it. The tune starts in earnest now. The room groans in unison, but no one stops him. There's a grudging respect for the bardless because of his talent, and more because he's clearly not deterred by a complete lack of it. Mainstream history often romanticizes bards as poetic wise troubadours wandering from court to castle spreading tales of heroism and ancient lore. Reality check. Many bards were underpaid, untrained, and under the influence of whatever they were offered in exchange for their services. Tonight's bard is no exception. He launches into a second verse, something about a knight whose armor rusted shut and had to be rescued by a goat. Someone snorts into their mug. You stifle a laugh. The child beside you is fully awake again, blinking at the scene as though witnessing an unsanctioned ritual. The bard continues undeterred, hitting notes that probably aren't even legal in some kingdoms. He raises a hand dramatically and attempts to end the verse with a falsetto that sounds like a goose in distress. Polite applause follows. Very polite, barely audible. Mostly out of fear hell start again if encouraged too much. A man near the fire tosses him a coin. The bard misses it, then pretends he didn't want it anyway. Historians still argue whether tavern bards held any true sway over public opinion, or were just tolerated for the sake of ambience. Some suggest their songs were powerful tools of social commentary. Others think they were just walking medieval memes. Either way, you're getting the full experience. Encore, the bard asks hopefully. The entire tavern answers almost in unison, no. He shrugs, plucks one last dramatic note, and settles into a corner to sip a bowl of stew like it's a consolation prize. Now that the musical interlude has ended, the buzz of conversation returns. The laughter, the gossip, the scraping of chairs life flows back into the room. But something has shifted. The bard's performance, as chaotic as it was, has acted like a strange reset button. The man beside you, the one who claimed to see a ghost, leans over and mutters, "Better than the last one. That one tried juggling live frogs." You raise an eyebrow. "One got loose. Whole mess." He chuckles, eyes glazed with memory and mead. You nod gravely. "That sounds about right. A quirky tavern detail you didn't expect." Some establishments had songboards, scratched planks where guests could suggest songs or tell the bard to please never play that one again. Of course, most bards couldn't read, but the gesture mattered. The bard, now nestled by the hearth, begins to softly hum to himself. You recognize none of the tune, but it's mercifully quiet and vaguely pleasant. He picks idly at the strings like he's plucking feathers from an invisible bird. Then, as if summoned by the very spirit of offbeat rhythm, the goats appear. You had forgotten about the goats. 2 of them, stubby-legged, confident. They emerge from under a table and trot toward the bard with the purposeful air of regulars. One headbutts his leg affectionately. The other settles at his feet. No one is surprised. Apparently, these are the tavern's musical critics. The bard pats one goat absent-mindedly. They liked the second verse, he says to no one in particular. You take another slow sip of ale. It's still warm, still strange. But now it tastes a little like victory. The bard pulls a small pipe from somewhere in his tunic and starts to blow a soft, meandering tune. Not a performance this time, just a quiet melody for himself, for the goats, for the room. You feel it settle in your bones. A gentle hum. The background music to a night that's slipping into something softer. One by one, conversations mellow. Mugs are half full and forgotten. The fire burns lower. A man drifts off mid-sentence. Someone snores gently into their bread. The goats doze. Even the one-eared dog is curled up on a discarded cloak, legs twitching as it chases dream rabbits. And you're still here, still warm, still upright mostly. You've heard music, met a ghost seer, shared stew with a cloaked child, and watched a man serenade livestock with confidence. You're not sure if this tavern is magical or just poorly maintained, possibly both. But either way, you're exactly where you need to be. The tavern has taken on a dreamlike quality now, the edges of the room softening with smoke and candlelight, the voices blending into a low, warm buzz. You're settled in just enough that your body no longer objects to the hardness of the bench or the stale musk of several overlapping centuries. You're drifting mentally, physically, until suddenly, wham! A tankard slams onto a nearby table with the force of a dropped anvil. You jolt upright. The one-eared dog growls. The goats blink. A spoon clatters to the floor. A cheer erupts from the far side of the room. It begins not with shouting, but with the clack of dice on wood, the unmistakable rallying cry of medieval entertainment turning volatile gambling. You shift on your stool and peer over a pair of shoulders to glimpse the action. Two men sit hunched at a small table, their brows furrowed in concentration. Dice roll. Coins clink. The air is tense the way it gets just before someone accuses someone else of witchcraft or having hidden aces. Not a thing but suspicion knows no rules. The stakes are unclear. Possibly silver pennies. Possibly the loser's boots. One man gestures wildly at a pile of turnips, implying they're somehow collateral. You watch as the dice bounce across the wood, spinning like tiny bones of fate, because they are bones carved from the knuckle bones of animals smoothed with time and many, many bad decisions. Medieval dice games were immensely popular. Easy to carry, simple to play, and almost always a cause for regret. Historians know that tavern brawls over cheating were so frequent that some towns banned gambling indoors altogether. This tavern clearly did not get the memo. One man wins the round. He grins, shows two teeth, and reaches for the potency to have the other man slap his hand and shout something about the demon's roll. You tense. Here it comes. A mug flies. It soars with impressive height like a greasy earthenware comet and shatters against the wall just inches from the bard, who doesn't flinch. He's seen worse, probably done worse. Everyone in the tavern now swivels toward the scene, and the chaos begins. The losing gambler flips the table. It's not an easy flip. It takes 2 tries and a lot of grunting, but once it goes, stew coins and a very surprised rat spill across the floor. The one-eared dog barks encouragement. The winner retaliates not with fists, but with his loot. Not his own loot, mind you. He grabs the bard's and swings it like a sword. The bard screeches. "My instrument," he cries, though no one is sure if he means the lute or his dignity. The lute makes contact with a loud twang. One string snaps dramatically. The goats scatter. Your table shifts as a man ducks under it for cover. You clutch your ale protectively. A stool is thrown. It spins mid-air and lands perfectly upright, an impressive feat that no one applauds because someone just yelled, "He stole my shoe." That accusation appears to be true. The man in question is now holding 2 left shoes and trying to argue their magic. You notice the barmaid isn't interfering. She's just watching from behind the bar, arms crossed, expression unreadable. This isn't her first tavern riot. This is her Tuesday. Eventually, the fight fizzles out, as all tavern fights don't up with a winner, but with exhaustion and someone getting distracted by soup. The dice are swept up. The coins are retrieved, -1 that rolls under your table and is now apparently yours. Congratulations on your winnings. The bard picks up the broken lute and sighs. She was almost tuned, he mutters, before tucking the ruined thing under one arm and wandering off toward the hearth. One of the gamblers now, with a slight limp and a bloody nose, plops onto a bench near you and groans. "Well," he says, wiping something suspicious from his cheek that was better than church. You nod slowly. That tracks. There's a certain inevitability to all this. Taverns weren't meant to be peaceful. They were pressure valves for daily life, a place where labourers, farmers, travellers and troublemakers could release their frustrations over dice drinks and dubious stew. Historians still argue whether taverns truly encouraged violent outbursts or simply absorbed them. Were they lawless dens of sin or vital centres for social venting? Maybe both. Tonight certainly makes a compelling argument for both. A quirky fact for the annals: some medieval taverns kept broken mugs on display, hung from ceiling beams like trophies. Each one had a story, a lost bet, a love spatter bard hit squarely in the chest mid-verse. A gallery of glorious misjudgment. You look around and sure enough, above the hearth, a shelf lined with shattered remnants of mugs and tankards. One has a small tag, Ulrich's Cup Do Not Return. The tavern slowly settles again. People resume their seats. A few mutter. One man laughs in that exhausted post-fight wheeze that says, "I have no idea what just happened, but I'm glad I still have pants." You finish the last of your ale. It's lukewarm and slightly grainy at the bottom. But you've earned this. You've watched a man duel with a lute, another argue with vegetables, and not once did you get hit with anything heavier than a breadcrumb. You did well. And somewhere inside you, just beneath the surface of the chaos and the smoke and the stale bread, you're starting to enjoy yourself. The tavern is settling once more in that peculiar medieval rhythm where calm follows chaos, the way a burp follows a questionable stew. Tables are righted. Coins are redistributed mostly to whoever had the nerve to keep them. The bard is gingerly plucking the one remaining string on his lute and pretending it still holds meaning. Your seat remains intact, though a little stickier than before. You're not entirely sure whether it's ale or stew residue. You've stopped caring. Your standards have adapted. That's called growth. And then comes a smell. Not a new one, just a stronger, more assertive version of something that's been lurking in the background since you arrived. It slinks out from the shadows behind the hearth, curling around your nose like a sinister whisper. Equal parts garlic mystery, meat, smoke, and regret. You've seen the cauldron. Everyone has. It's enormous soot black and hangs on a massive iron hook above a fire that seems unnaturally enthusiastic. Now the tavern keeper herself is approaching it, with a ladle large enough to serve a family of bears. She stirs the pot. The sound is sludgy, wet, like a boot being pulled out of a bog. She scoops out a portion and dumps it into a wooden bowl that's seen better decades. She sprinkles something green and possibly still alive on top, a sprig of authenticity. Then she turns, locking eyes with you. Oh no. You're not ready. You didn't order it. You haven't done anything wrong. But still she lumbers toward your table with a look that says, you look like you could use some fortification or punishment. She places the bowl in front of you with the solemnity of a judge delivering a sentence. It smells intense. Not bad exactly, just complicated. You lean over and inspect the contents. It's brown. It's lumpy. It steams with a force that suggests internal debate. Floating near the top is something shaped like a foot or a turnip. Possibly both. The broth is thick, almost gelatinous, and there's an oily sheen that catches the candlelight like stained glass. You glance up at the tavern keeper. She stares down at you like a hawk waiting for its chick to try flying. You nod. She nods. Transaction complete. Historians tell us that tavern stews were catch-alls. Meat, grains, root vegetables, old bread, and whatever didn't crawl out of the pot on its own all simmered for hours, or days. In some places the stew pot never truly emptied. They just added more to it each day like a perpetual soup of history. Some called it pottage. Others just called it Tuesday. You dip your spoon in and stir gently. Something pokes back. You brave a scoop. It glops into your mouth with surprising velocity. And you know what? It's not terrible. It's salty, peppery, meaty in a way that doesn't suggest a specific animal, but definitely something with legs. Your teeth meet something chewy, possibly barley, possibly cartilage, and then something sweet, like a rogue parsnip. You keep going. There's something comforting about it. The warmth, the weight, the sense that this same stew may have been eaten by 100 people before you, and that all of you somehow shared in the same unspoken pact. Don't ask questions. A man next to you nods at your bowl. boar maybe, he says, or mushroom, another suggests. Could be eel off as a third. No one agrees, but no one argues either. You've entered a sacred zone now, the late tavern meal, when the ales dulled your fear and hunger makes anything edible. You're not alone. All around you, patrons have quieted. The bickering's stopped. Even the bard is slurping. This is the moment before the night tips towards sleep or more trouble. A quirky fact, some medieval stews included ingredients considered aphrodisiacs, nutmeg, mustard seed, or even crushed eggshells. Others were meant to cure colds, melancholia, or heartbreak. Tonight's stew, probably good for scaring off rats and vampires. Suddenly you bite into something hard. You freeze. Slowly, cautiously, you remove it from your mouth. It's a tooth. Your stomach tightens until you realize with relief and a touch of medieval pride that it's probably not human. Probably. More like a pig molar or a deer's. It's a bonus, a keepsake, a story. You wipe it on your sleeve and place it beside your bowl like a trophy. The child across the table eyes it admiringly. The stew thickens as it cools. You finish most of it using your crust of bread to mop the bowl. You feel full in a way you haven't felt since you left the road, like you've eaten something that might keep you alive until morning. You lean back. The bench creaks. The tavern hums quietly around you. The kind of hum that suggests bellies are full, fists are relaxed, and the goats are for now sleeping. You've eaten the stew. You've survived the stew. You belong here now. You lean back on your now deeply personalized bench, slightly warmer than when you arrived, possibly from stew sweat or the residual heat of survival. The tavern hums around you in that cozy post-supper lull. Mugs clink softly, and someone begins snoring into their own shoulder like a satisfied bear. It's time. Time to venture upward to the bedchambers, or at least whatever patch of straw-covered wood passes for one. You stand slowly, joints clicking like castanets. The stew has settled somewhere near your spleen, and the ale sloshes with every step. You brace yourself for the climb. A narrow staircase hugs the far wall, disappearing into shadows, promising uncertain footing and probable splinters. You reach it, and immediately pause. Because there, in your path on the third step, up, is a chicken. Not a drawing of a chicken, not the memory of a chicken, a very real, very living, deeply unbothered chicken. It stands proudly on the stair like some feathery gatekeeper to the upper realm. It fluffs its wings, cocks its head, and makes a low clucking sound that translates roughly to, "You shall not pass." You and the chicken lock eyes. It does not blink. You clear your throat politely. Nothing. You try stepping around it. It pecks your boot, not hard, just enough to assert dominion. Someone from a nearby table chuckles. "That's Margaret," they say. "She likes the top stair. Sings at dawn." You look back at Margaret. She has not moved. Margaret is in charge now. You try a gentle nudge with your toe. Margaret squawks flaps once and grudgingly steps aside just enough to let you by. You thank her. You feel compelled to bow. Margaret accepts. Historians still debate whether animals freely roamed medieval taverns or if this was a sign of lower-class establishments. Chickens, goats, and even the occasional pig weren't just tolerated, they were part of the rhythm. Egg layers, scrap eaters, comic relief. Also, excellent burglar alarms. The stairs creak with each step, announcing your ascent to anyone still pretending to care. The banister is a wobbly, half-whittled branch of questionable origin. You reach the top, heart-thumping slightly, head buzzing faintly. The hallway or loft really is lit by a single candle nailed to the wall with wax drips so extensive they could be mistaken for architecture. There are 4 doors. None are labelled. All are slightly ajar. You pick one and push it open slowly. Inside a room just large enough to call a room if you squint and suspend disbelief. The bed, or what aspires to be one, is a raised wooden frame with a burlap sack stuffed with straw. A single wool blanket lies across it like an afterthought. The air smells faintly of smoke, damp wood, and old farts. You step inside, and the floor groans not in pain, but more like a warning. Historians note that tavern bedrooms were not private in the modern sense. Often you'd be sharing a space with strangers, pilgrims, travellers, maybe someone with the plague, though ideally not anymore. Privacy was optional. Snoring was mandatory. You set your belongings, if you have any, by the wall and sit on the bed. It crunches, not like bugs, more like dry leaves, comforting. You kick off your boots, or rather peel them off with a series of undignified grunts. One sock remains. You let it. Outside the room, the tavern noise is softer now. Just murmurs, fire pops, and the clink of a final mug. Someone coughs in the hallway. A board creaks. Margaret clucks approvingly from the stairwell. You lie back. The ceiling is low, close enough to touch. You do. The wood is rough, splintered, but oddly solid. You feel safe beneath it. Safe-ish. There's a window. Tiny. Shuttered. You open it slightly and let in a whisper of cold night air. It carries the scent of chimney smoke, wet earth, and distant manure. Still, it's the freshest air you've breathed all day. Then you hear it. Tap, tap, tap. Soft claws on the floorboards. You turn your head slowly. Margaret is in the room. She's made it up the stairs. You're not sure how. She hops onto the end of the bed with all the authority of a well-fed cat, tucks her legs beneath her feathery body and stares at you once more. You blink. She blinks. You sigh. It's fine. This is fine. You share the room now. Co-tenants. You pull the itchy blanket up to your chest and nestle into the straw. It pokes. It crinkles. You find one soft spot and guard it with your spine-like treasure. The candle flickers low. A moth drifts lazily through the beam of light. The one-eared dog howls once softly from downstairs. Margaret sighs. And you start to drift. Sleep comes slowly. Not because you aren't tired, you're absolutely exhausted, but because your bed seems to be built on a secret cache of twigs, possibly a petrified spoon, and at least one stone with a grudge. Every time you shift, the straw crinkles like someone crumpling parchment in your ear. The blanket itches in places you didn't know you had. The pillow, if you can call it that, is a sack of something lumpy that might be sawdust beans or the crumbled remains of past guests' dreams. Still, it's a bed. You remind yourself of this several times. Downstairs, the tavern's murmur has dwindled to just a few stragglers muttering over mugs, the occasional stool scrape, and the low hum of someone singing an off-key lullaby to their ale. Margaret snores. Yes, the chicken snores. And just as you're about to fall into a blissfully awkward slouch of sleep drip, you feel it. A drop. Cold. Right on your forehead. You open your eyes and stare at the ceiling. Another drop hangs from a beam like a medieval sword of Damocles. It plops onto your blanket this time, soaking into the wool with a dismal splot. Wonderful. You've been assigned the leaky room. You shift your body a few inches to the left away from the drip zone. The bed responds with a resounding cracknot broken just announcing its displeasure. Margaret shifts with you, flapping briefly before settling into her warm chicken loaf once more. The room is quiet again. You close your eyes. Crash. You jolt upright. Silence. Then laughter from downstairs. Someone's knocked over a bench or a person. It doesn't matter. It's not your problem unless it's on fire or coming up the stairs. You lie back. Count your breaths. 1, 2, 3. Skirk! A long, low scratching noise just on the other side of the wall. Your heart skips. Then you remember, medieval tavern walls are basically decorative. A goat sneezing in the hallway sounds like a bear breaking in. The scratch was likely just someone adjusting a chair, or adjusting to sleep in their chair, or possibly dying quietly. You breathe. Inhale the scent of wood smoke, wool, and ancient mildew. It's not relaxing exactly, but at this point you'll take anything that doesn't involve stew or violence. You adjust the pillow. Bad idea. It's somehow lumpier on the other side. You flip it back and promise never to question it again. Then comes the snoring. Not yours, not Margaret's. It's someone in the room next door or possibly in the wall. A deep, thunderous rumble that starts low and ends with a squeaky wheeze, like a sleeping bear trapped in a bagpipe. It's relentless. You bury your face in your arm. Doesn't help. You try humming. Only makes Margaret stir. She opens one eye and gives you a look that says, "Welcome to my world." You try stuffing the blanket into your ears. It tickles. You sneeze. The noise stops for 3 glorious seconds, then returns louder. Historians still argue whether medieval sleeping quarters in taverns were truly shared or simply adjacent, but plenty of records describe communal sleep, a horror show of snoring, farting, and blanket thievery. One monk even wrote that sleeping in a tavern was akin to prayer in a thunderstorm, both loud and filled with pleas for mercy. You try counting sheep. You get to 8 before realizing all your imaginary sheep have Margaret's face. You try shifting again, which earns you another loud creak and what may have been a disapproving chicken cluck. Eventually, your body gives up, not in defeat, but in sheer surrender. Your eyes flutter closed, and just as you're about to fade away, squish. You sit bolt upright, your foot landed in something wet. You swing your legs off the bed and reach down. It's the chamber pot, the full one. Oh no. You hop back onto the bed in a panic, shaking your foot like it's caught fire. Margaret panics too, leaping into the air with an indignant squawk and fluttering directly into the wall where she slides down slowly like a pancake of shame. You both freeze. You look at her. She looks at you. Neither of you speak. It's fine. It's all fine. You pull the scratchy blanket tighter around yourself, shivering from the cold drip and the new knowledge that your foot has touched someone else's bodily regrets. Eventually you find a dry part of the bed and roll toward it. Margaret climbs back onto the end of the mattress and nestles in with a soft grumble. The snoring continues through the wall. The wind sighs against the shutters. The chamber pot sits there full and judgmental. And somehow you start to drift. Because sleep in the medieval world doesn't come from comfort, it comes from collapse. From surviving the stew, the ale, the dice game, the loot duel, and the stare down with a paltry landlord. You've made it this far, and in a place like this, that's a miracle in itself. Morning arrives without warning. No rooster crowing. No sunbeams gently dancing across your face. No dreamlike whisper coaxing you from slumber. Nope. Instead, you're jolted awake by a violent thud, followed by an exasperated, "Blast this pig," and the unmistakable sound of hooves clattering down a wooden hallway. You sit up. Every bone in your body protests. The straw mattress has shifted in the night, leaving you tangled in something that might be part of an old broom. The blanket twisted damp, and now half on the floor smells distinctly like regret. Margaret is gone. You spot her pecking at a crumb by the door, unbothered by your existential crisis. She ruffles her feathers, looks at you like you snored too loud, and waddles off to resume her chickenly duties. You swing your legs over the side of the bed cautiously this time. Your toes find the chamber pot again, but miraculously, it's been emptied or kicked. Either way, it's dry. You mutter a quiet thanks to whichever medieval deity oversees bodily functions. You stretch. Something in your back makes a noise like a tree splitting in winter, and then you stand. It takes effort. You're sore in places you didn't know could be sore. Your head aches slightly, not a full hangover, just a gentle reminder that last night's ale was probably fermented in a boot. You shuffle to the window and push the shutters open. Outside, dawn. A pale grey sky stretches across the crooked rooftops. Smoke curls from chimneys. A donkey brays like it's composing an opera. Someone yells about missing eggs. Someone else yells back that they weren't that good anyway. The town is waking up. Your stomach rumbles. You remember the stew, then immediately wish you didn't. You gather your things if you brought any and step out into the hallway. It's narrow, dark, and smells faintly of damp wood and dried herbs. A child runs past you barefoot, carrying a spoon like a sword. You nod respectfully. Back down the stairs you go, slowly, carefully. The steps creak like they're trying to tell secrets. One of them shifts under your foot, threatening to introduce you head first to the tavern floor. You cling to the wall like a cautious spider and make it to the bottom. Margaret beats you there, of course. The main room is almost unrecognizable in the light. The fire is little more than embers now glowing faintly in the hearth. The tables are cleared mostly. A few mugs remain fossilized in ale. One chair is upside down. The bard is asleep under a bench, hugging his broken lute like a teddy bear. The goats are gone. You don't ask questions. The barmaid is already sweeping. She moves with mechanical precision, brushing centuries of dust and questionable memories into a corner. She doesn't acknowledge you. She doesn't have to. You take a seat near the window, close enough to watch the town stretch its limbs. A blacksmith walks by, yawning into a piece of cloth. A woman dumps a chamber pot into the street with the casual air of someone watering flowers. You breathe deeply. It smells terrible, but honest. The tavern keeper appears behind the bar, hair, tied-back apron already stained. She slides a small bowl your way without a word. Breakfast, inside porridge, or at least its ancestral form, pale, lumpy, possibly oats, possibly gravel. You eat it anyway. It's warm, mildly sweet, and mostly devoid of last night's existential dread. Historians note that medieval breakfasts were light if they happened at all. Many peasants and travellers waited until midday to eat. But in taverns, the keepers knew that serving something in the morning, anything kept patrons coming back, even if it tasted like boiled sack. You sip a new mug of ale. It's lighter, thinner, probably small ale brewed for morning use. It tastes like bread tea, but your body is grateful. A nearby patron mutters something about a tax collector arriving today. Another complains about a neighbour's goat learning how to open doors. You nod at both, despite understanding neither. You glance around one last time. The tavern, now bathed in daylight, looks older somehow, like a performer without its makeup. The beams are cracked, the floor is warped. There's a weird stain on the ceiling you didn't notice last night, but you love it anyway. Because this place, this noisy, smoky, leaky, goat-infested tavern took you in, fed you, didn't kill you, and gave you a story. And in the medieval world, that's hospitality. You stand to leave. The barmaid doesn't stop sweeping. The tavern keeper offers a nod so subtle it might have just been a neck itch. Outside, the wind tugs at your cloak. The sky is still grey. But the world feels different now. You survived the tavern, and somehow, impossibly, you kind of want to come back. You step out of the tavern and into the crisp morning air, only to be immediately greeted by a wayward goose pecking at your boot. You freeze. The goose stares. You stare back. The goose hisses. You wisely step aside. A classic medieval encounter, man versus poultry, and poultry wins. Again. You trudge a few paces down the road, your joints stiff and your mind foggy when you realize something profound. Your back hurts in entirely new places. Congratulations. You've earned your first tavern hangover. It's not just from the ale. It's from sleeping on straw, dodging chamber pots, and sharing floor space with livestock. But it's a badge of honor, really. You glance back at the tavern. It looks smaller now, more crooked in the daylight, like it's been exhaling all night and finally slumped into its true shape. The paint on the sign has faded further in just a few hours, and a single feather drifts lazily from the upper window. Margaret, no doubt. The road ahead is muddy, littered with prints, bare feet, cloven hooves, and the mysterious triple-toed impression of whatever that thing was last night behind the hearth. You adjust your cloak and begin the slow march forward. A light breeze carries the smell of wet leaves and baking bread. Somewhere a bell tolls. A few other travellers pass by, one with a wheelbarrow full of turnips, another leading a pig on a rope like a pet. You exchange weary nods. You all know what it means to emerge from a night in a tavern. You survive something not everyone does, with your dignity mostly intact. Mostly. Your stomach gurgles, possibly a farewell gift from the stew. You glance down and realize you're missing a sock. Just one. The other is damp and clinging on for dear life. You assume the lost one was claimed by the straw bed, or Margaret, or some dark force that feeds on warm fabric. A man passes you whistling a tune that sounds oddly familiar. You listen for a moment and then realize, yes, it's the bard's terrible song from last night. It's somehow catchy, like a plague with rhythm. You hum along before catching yourself and muttering, "Nope, not today." The town begins to blur behind you, a patchwork of crooked rooftops, chimney smoke and shouting. It fades into the backdrop of travel, just another page in your journey. But that tavern, that sleepless, steamy, chaotic cocoon will stay with you longer than any monastery or market. Historians often wonder what made the medieval tavern endure. It wasn't cleanliness. It wasn't comfort. It certainly wasn't the cuisine. No, it was something else, something still alive in pubs and corner bars today. The simple human need to gather to share stories, to escape the cold, and to drink something mildly suspicious with someone you'll never see again. You pass a cart stuck in the mud. Two boys argue about whether they should push or just ask the saints to float it. You keep walking. Your boots are already soaked. The trees ahead loom darker. You're heading into the woods now. The road narrows. The birds are awake, gossiping in the branches. One of them dive bombs a worm with the efficiency of a seasoned tavern maid handling a drunk. You smile. You're tired. You're sore. You smell faintly of burnt meat and old ale. And yet there's a quiet pride settling in your chest. You did it. You faced the sticky floorboards. You ordered the ale. You survived the stew. You learned to fear chickens. And you now possess the intimate knowledge of what a goat fight sounds like from 10 feet away. And sure, maybe you didn't get the best sleep. Maybe your pillow was an insult to the very idea of softness. Maybe your foot dipped into a stranger's pee bucket. But you're still here. You made it out. The sun breaks through the clouds for a moment, casting golden light across the muddy path. It illuminates a stone, a patch of moss, and yes, your missing sock. Hanging from a fence post like a medieval flag of defeat, you pause. Consider retrieving it. You don't. It's better that way. You walk on, past geese and gossip, past chimneys and chickens, back to the road, and whatever madness waits next. The sun is rising higher now, pulling reluctant shadows back into their corners and revealing just how truly filthy your boots have become. They squelch with every step, bits of tavern floor still clinging to the soles like mementos. You try not to think about what exactly they're clinging to. The road stretches ahead, a winding ribbon of muck and frostbitten hope. Each step squishes or crunches depending on whether you hit mud or some unfortunate branch. A cluster of crows cackle overhead. You nod in their direction. They seem like they'd understand everything you've just been through. Behind you, the tavern has disappeared around a bend. It's almost hard to believe it ever existed, like a fever dream built from smoke and turnips and ale. But your sore legs, your missing sock, and the faint stew stain on your sleeve assure you it was very, very real. As you trudge onward, you pass a group of villagers gathered around a wagon wheel that's mysteriously vanished. They're arguing about whether it was stolen, cursed, or eaten by a mischievous forest spirit. No one seems particularly surprised. You smile faintly. You've seen stranger things in the last 12 hours, like a goat duel, like stew that moved on its own, like Margaret the chicken who could easily run for mayor and win. The forest thins as you walk. Fields begin to appear, frosted over, dotted with sheep, some of whom look like they've had harder nights than you. A shepherd gives you a wave, then thinks better of it, lowering his hand in slow confusion. You probably look like a vagrant who lost a fight with a haystack. You pass a shrine by the roadside, its stone base chipped and mossy. You pause briefly, touch the edge in silent respect. In the medieval world, every journey is touched by the divine, the ridiculous, or both. You're hoping for a bit more divine from here on out. You sip the last of your water. It's lukewarm and slightly metallic. You miss the ale already. Sort of. Your mind wanders back to the tavern, its chaos, its crusty bread, its characters. The bard with his war-torn lute, the barmaid who could probably kill a man with a spoon, the gambler with 2 left shoes, the child wrapped in 6 layers of wool. Margaret, you wonder if they'll remember you. You suspect not. Travellers come and go. But maybe, just maybe, your name is now carved into the underside of a bench or scrawled into a wall, a silent witness to one night of being part of the blur. Historians say the medieval world was brutal, short and unforgiving, and they're not wrong. But it was also full of strange warmth moments, huddled by fires, meals shared without names, and the kind of tired laughter that only happens when everyone's just too worn out to pretend anymore. You find a tree stump and sit for a moment. The road continues on as roads do. There's always another village, another muddy crossing, another night. But last night, that one's yours. You take a deep breath, let it out slow. The world smells like cold earth, damp leaves, and something cooking, far off, a reminder that even out here someone's stirring a pot. Probably stew, always stew. And as the breeze picks up and the sky turns a paler blue and your feet begin to ache just a little less, you realize something. You made it. You really did. Word count 1079. Wind down 300 words. Let the road fade now. Let the echoes of dice, clattering ale, sloshing, and chickens softly clucking fall behind you, quiet and hazy. The tavern, with its crooked beams and flickering light, settles into memory, as comfortable as it was uncomfortable, a soft blur of strange warmth, strange stew, and strange kindness. Imagine the path stretching out behind you, covered in soft morning mist. The footprints you left already being swallowed by the day. The smell of wood smoke still caught in your clothes lingers as a reminder you were there. You were part of that night. Let your body relax now, sinking into stillness like straw settling under the weight of sleep. Your muscles might be sore, but they carried you through a rough bench, a long laugh, a wooden spoon duel that thankfully never happened. Let your breathing slow in time with the imagined sway of the trees and the rhythm of distant hoofbeats. There's no rush anymore. No ale to sip, no ghost stories to overhear, just the hush of dawn, the weight of a full belly, and the peaceful exhaustion of having made it through a truly ridiculous night. Maybe you'll dream of tavern songs sung just off-key enough to be charming, or maybe of that mysterious stew ingredient you never identified, or maybe, just maybe, Margaret the chicken now reigning over a kingdom of hay and splinters. You're safe now, warm, fed, tired in the best possible way. Let go. Let the road wait. Sleep well, traveller. Hey guys, tonight we're travelling far from taverns and turnips to a place where laughter is rare, bread is coarse, and speaking after breakfast is frowned upon. That's right, you've decided to join a medieval monastery. Why? Maybe you're seeking spiritual clarity. Maybe your village got a bit too plaguey. Or maybe you just wanted somewhere quiet to sleep that didn't involve chickens on the stairs. Well, be careful what you wish for. Because right now you're being yanked from sleep by a hand on your shoulder and a bell that sounds like it's announcing the end of days. It's pitch dark. Your straw mattress is cold. Your feet are colder. You blink into the void, unsure what century it is, and remember matins. The night office. The first of 8 daily prayers, and the one that happens before sunrise while your dreams are still trying to finish their last sentence. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing the global bedtime crew checking in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up slowly. Your blanket is little more than a woven wool rug, and it's clinging to you like a wet leaf. You swing your legs off the bed and wince as your bare feet hit the stone floor. Medieval monks weren't big on heated anything. You grope for your robe in the dark. Its itchy smells faintly of beeswax and cabbage, and has definitely seen better centuries. But it's yours, and that's saying something. You wrap it tightly and join the slow procession of other monks shuffling silently toward the chapel. The hallways are cold. Not brrr, cold soul contemplation cold. The kind of chill that seeps into your bones and stays there whispering things like, "You should have been a baker." A single torch flickers on the wall, its light dancing weakly on the damp stone. Someone ahead of you coughs. Someone else mutters a prayer under their breath, probably asking for strength, warmth, or a breakfast without beans. As you enter the chapel, the silence deepens. It's vast, echoey, and lit only by the wavering glow of oil lamps. Shadows stretch along the high stone walls, and the faint smell of incense clings to the air like a distant memory. You find your place in the choir stalls, wooden seats with narrow ledges for kneeling and zero ergonomic consideration. Your knees protest. Your back creaks. You fold your hands anyway. The abbot enters. He nods once. The prayer begins. Latin fills the room, soft, halting, uncertain. The younger novices fumble the lines. The older monks chant with worn familiarity. You mumble along, hoping no one notices you skipped a whole verse by accident. This is the rhythm of monastic life prayer, silence, duty, repeat. Historians agree that Matinsol's so-called vigils was the most challenging of the canonical hours. Held in the dead of night, it required deep devotion, or at least a stubborn sleep schedule. Some monasteries even split it in 2 sessions to avoid monks dozing off mid-psalm. Others simply whacked sleepers with a stick, gently, monastically. You glance sideways. One of the brothers is definitely nodding off. His head jerks, then his eyes snap open just in time to whisper, "Amen," like he meant to do that. Classic Brother Gilbert. The prayer drags on. Your breath fogs in front of you. Your stomach rumbles. You consider repenting for being hungry during prayer. Then remember that monks are always hungry, and probably that counts as normal in the rule of Saint Benedict. The chapel creaks as wind slips through unseen cracks. You focus on the flicker of candlelight, the rhythm of the chant, the feeling of being somewhere outside of time. A quirky monastic detail: some monks, particularly in colder regions, tied strings from their sleeves to their candles at night so that when the candle burned low, it would tug their arm and wake them for matins. Primitive alarm clocks, mildly flammable. Eventually the final verse is sung, the bell is rung again, and the abbot dismisses you all with a nod. No applause, no thanks for coming. Just the quiet shuffling of dozens of sore feet returning to their cells or on to the next ritual. You step back into the hallway. The air feels slightly warmer now, either from the effort of being awake or your own growing tolerance for medieval suffering. You try not to fall asleep standing up. It's still dark outside, still hours before dawn, but your day has begun. Welcome to monastic life. Sleep is optional. You move with the quiet tide of brothers through the cloister walk-arced stone corridors that wrap around a cold, damp courtyard like arms made of discipline. Your footsteps echo off the flagstones in solemn rhythm, the shuffle of sandaled feet on ancient stone sounding like distant waves on a very pious beach. No one speaks. No one needs to. This is the hour of reflection and also, frankly, survival. Your breath fogs in front of you, barely visible in the pre-dawn dark, and your fingers are already numb inside your robe sleeves. You keep them tucked close, cradling what little warmth remains like it's the last biscuit at a feast. The chapel bell has stopped ringing, leaving behind the faint memory of vibration in your chest. The air feels lighter without its weight, but heavier with expectation. You have more prayer ahead of you yet. Lord's is coming. But first, a pause. You enter the chapter house, a semicircular chamber off the cloister, where announcements, discipline, and scripture are read daily. The room is lit by slits in the wall that pretend to be windows, admitting just enough light to suggest the sun still exists. Barely. You sit in strict order according to seniority. You are not senior. You are closer to enthusiastic intern who asked too many questions and was handed a hoe. The monk next to you smells faintly of onions and sanctity. A voice begins reading softly, today's passage from the Rule of Saint Benedict. Something about humility, or silence, or humility while being silent. It's hard to tell. You try to listen, you really do, but your brain is currently calculating how long until breakfast and if chewing on your sleeve would count as immoderate appetite. Historians still argue whether the daily readings in monasteries served more as spiritual guidance or as gentle peer pressure wrapped in Latin. But no one disputes their central place in monastic structure. They were the backbone of the order, and also possibly an effective sleep deterrent. You zone back in just in time to hear the word obedience and a brief discussion of Brother Odos' incident with the cheese knife. No one elaborates. You assume it ended peacefully, probably. You're dismissed without fanfare, and once again the monks rise as one. You flow with them down a narrow corridor toward the washing area. Here, long stone basins line the wall, fed by a trickle of water cold enough to kill dreams. You wait your turn. A monk ahead of you lets out a barely audible gasp as he dips his hands in. You pretend not to notice. Stoicism is key. Finally, it's your turn. You roll up your sleeves, dip your hands into the water, and immediately regret every decision that brought you here. It's not just cold. It's an insult, a betrayal, a moral test. You manage to splash your face and rinse your fingers before your knuckles go white. No soap today, not unless you're lucky, and you're not. You wipe your face dry on the edge of your sleeve, which is just damp enough to be counterproductive. You look up. A mirror would be nice, but vanity is frowned upon, so instead you stare into the wet stone wall and accept that you probably look like a half-thawed owl. Cleanish, you follow the others into the chapel once more. Lords. The sky outside is beginning to lighten, a faint grey creeping in at the corners of the stained glass. You take your place, kneel, stand, bow. The routine feels familiar now, calming even, like a song you know all the words to, even if you never quite know what verse you're on. The chant rises again. Low, steady, and slightly nasal thanks to Brother Clement's ongoing sinus situation. You close your eyes. You don't sleep, but you drift just a little, enough to lose your place, miss a Gloria Patri, and mumble your way through the next line while pretending you meant to harmonize. A quirky monastic detail, it was not uncommon for monks to quietly borrow each other's place in chant lines if they nodded off, creating a sort of musical whack-a-mole where someone was always responsible for picking up the slack. You silently thank whoever covered your lapse just now. The service ends. You rise slowly. Knees creaking, spine bending at angles monks probably weren't meant to. You're hungry now. Properly hungry. Not stew-desperate tavern-level hungry, but the quiet, disciplined hunger of someone who knows breakfast will be exactly the same as yesterday. And the day before that. And last Lent. Still food is food. And it's finally time. You file into the Frater, the monastery's refectory, with the grace of a pilgrim who knows salvation lies at the bottom of a wooden bowl. The long, narrow hall is dim, its windows admitting just enough light to see your breath as you shuffle in, clutching your wooden spoon like a sacred relic. Silence is absolute. No talking, no humming, No belly growl jokes. You've learnt this the hard way your first week here. You whispered a question about whether the bread was still alive. Brother Severin did not laugh. Brother Severin never laughs. Brother Severin assigned you stable duty for a week. So now you enter mouth shut, eyes down, following the others to your spot on the bench. The table is long and bare, save for a few loaves of dark hard bread and several steaming pots lined down the centre. The smell is promising, earthy, slightly vegetal, maybe even a hint of onion. Your stomach perks up with cautious optimism. Across from you, Brother Aelric is already seated. His beard has reached a point of theological authority all on its own. He nods at you, once the kind of nod that says, "May we both survive this meal." As you sit, the lectora, designated monk for the week, steps up to the pulpit in the corner and begins to read. Today, it's St. Jerome detailing the dangers of pride. You focus on his voice while your body instinctively reaches for the bread. You tear off a piece and immediately regret how enthusiastic you were. It's dense, like could stop a charging boar dense. You chew and chew and chew. Your jaw begins to question its career path. Next comes a ladleful of porridge or gruel or something in that blessed family. Warm, beige and lumpy. You spoon it into your mouth and let the steam numb your taste buds before the flavour can object. Historians confirm that monastic meals were designed to avoid indulgence. Think boiled beans, lentils, root vegetables, bread that doubled as a weapon, and on rare days fish. Seasoning was minimal. Sometimes salt, rarely herbs. Joy forbidden. A quirky rule from Cluniac monasteries, monks were only allowed to eat 2 meals a day, one at midday and one at dusk. And meat from 4-legged animals was banned unless you were sick. Which, strangely, a lot of monks managed to become right before feast days. You keep eating, careful not to slurp or scrape your spoon. Any noise would draw a disapproving glance from Brother Oswin, who hears with the accuracy of a trained bat. He sits 3 seats down, a steaming bowl before him, his spoon moving with perfect rhythm like an angry metronome. The lector continues. Something about resisting temptation. You nod gently in rhythm, as if in deep agreement, though you're mostly focused on the way your stew bubbles when you stir it slowly. A tiny bubble pops. You feel spiritually moved. Suddenly the door creaks. Everyone stiffens slightly, not from fear but from habit. A new arrival at breakfast is rare. You glance up. It's the guestmaster, Brother Renulf, followed by a young novice you don't recognize. The boy's robe is too long, his eyes wide. He's clearly new, possibly arrived last night. Poor soul. He's shown to a seat near the back and given a half loaf of bread that he accepts like it's a diplomatic mission. He bows awkwardly, knocks over his spoon. Everyone pretends not to notice. Mostly. You chew your last bite, slowly letting the warmth settle in your belly. There's something soothing about this ritual, the sameness, the structure, the quiet companionship of others also chewing their way to God. The lector reaches the end of the passage. He closes the book with a soft thump. That's the signal. You bow your head for a silent prayer of thanks, not just for the food, but for surviving another monastic breakfast with your reputation intact. Then slowly you rise with the others. Bow slightly toward the high table. Step back from the bench. And begin the quiet procession back toward your day's labors. Your stomach is fullish, your robe is still itchy, and you suspect there's a beetle in your sleeve, but you're ready. Today, you're assigned to the garden. Again. You sigh silently, of course, and follow the line of monks back into the courtyard. The cold air greets you like an old, unwashed friend. The bell chimes. You adjust your hood and head toward the herb beds, one hand clutching your belt cord, the other still slightly sticky from breakfast. You step back out into the morning air and immediately question every life choice that led to you becoming the monastery's unofficial chief weed inspector. The sky is still grey clouds hanging low like a blanket someone forgot to shake out. The breeze is gentle but determined, the kind that somehow finds every gap in your robe and sets up camp there like it's paying rent. You trudge across the cloister walk and through the arched stone doorway that leads to the monastery's gardena, surprisingly large and slightly chaotic patch of green, brown and damp. To outsiders it might look peaceful. To you it smells like compost and quiet judgment. This is no pleasure garden. It's part vegetable patch, part herbal pharmacy, part test of your willingness to crouch for 3 hours without falling asleep. You pass Brother Cadric already elbow deep in a row of leeks, muttering psalms with the rhythm of a man who's been hoeing since sunrise. You nod. He doesn't look up. Your assigned bed is the herb plot parsley, sage, mint, thyme and tansy, though tansy is really just a polite way to say smells like regret and is possibly poisonous. You grab your basket, your weeding hook, and kneel in front of the patch like a penitent sinner facing their leafy accuser. Pull, toss, pull, toss, one weed at a time. Monastic gardening part, discipline part, spiritual metaphor part, light-back trauma. Historians agree that monasteries were some of the best organized agricultural centers of the medieval world. They pioneered composting methods, crop rotations, and even early forms of pest control that did not involve setting fire to the entire plot and walking away. You try to focus on your task, though the mint is trying to take over everything, and you're fairly sure one of the plants just moved. You brush away a beetle which gives you a look of deep offense before trundling off under a leaf. Time moves strangely out here. There's no clock, just the sun crawling across the sky and the tolling of bells. You find yourself counting the weeds instead of the hours. 37, 38. You lose count when you accidentally pull up what may have been an important medicinal root. You replant it hastily and look around. No witnesses. Good. Then you hear it. Honk. Your heart sinks. You turn slowly. The goose is back. More specifically the goose, a large, battle-worn creature with one droopy wing and a hatred for footwear. It struts into the garden like it owns the land, which unfortunately it kind of does. The monks let it stay after it bit a visiting noble and caused his entourage to flee in shame. It's considered a minor miracle. You freeze. The goose locks eyes with you. There is no malice. There is only judgment. You go back to weeding, slowly, respectfully. The goose waddles closer, sniffs your basket, steals a sprig of sage, chews it slowly, staring you down, then leaves. You're not sure if you passed a test or just had your pockets picked by poultry. You let out a long breath, and then the bell rings again. You stand up carefully because your knees feel like they're filled with porridge. You stretch your back, which cracks loudly enough to scare a bird out of a nearby tree. The goose remains unbothered. You head toward the cloister once more, herb basket in hand. Inside are neat bundles of mint parsley and a few suspicious leaves you hope aren't just weeds you pulled out of embarrassment. You'll let the infirmarian figure that out. Your next stop, the scriptorium. You've been summoned there to assist, which means two things. 1. You're going to be surrounded by parchment ink and holy words. 2. You're going to be very tempted to fall asleep while pretending to proofread Latin. But for now, you walk back across the cloister. Walk herb-scented and vaguely heroic. A weed warrior, a sage survivor. You pass Brother Tillo, who's trimming the rose bushes with a pair of sheep shears. He nods at your basket. Mint again, he whispers. Technically breaking the silence rule. You nod. Good for bellyaches, he murmurs. And goose bites, you think. You enter the stone corridor leading to the heart of monastic scholarship. The scriptorium. Your knees ache. Your hands are dirty. Your back is screaming, but your soul quiet. And for a monk, that's progress.